Okay, guys. Today we have Tim Richardson from the Washington Post speaking to us. Tim, what I was hoping maybe we could start with is just you talking a little bit about your career to date, how you got where you are. First of all, I'm going to pop the screen up so we can see all of your beautiful face. But maybe just tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up at the Washington Post.
Sure. I first started for 5 years at the newspaper in Topeka, Kansas. I left there to go to the newspaper in Naples, Florida. And from there, I actually had my first tour of duty at the Washington Post. I was here for a year and a half. That would have been in 07, 08. And then I left for a job in Las Vegas, and I was out there for about 3.5 years, and then came back to DC, and for about 8 months I was across the street at the Washington Examiner, and then joined the Post after that, and I've been here for about 3 years.
So Tim, how did you end up in journalism? Why journalism?
I know a lot of people aren't kind of sure what they're doing until later in college, and for me that wasn't my experience. I mean, I was on the newspaper staff in like 6th and 7th grade when it was first offered. It's just been something I've wanted to do, to be able to in those days tell stories in print, and then obviously things have developed and merged, and technology is so vastly different now than it was back then. But in the end, it was all just really meeting new people and telling their stories always was very appealing to me, and I just kind of stuck with it over the years.
And for what it's worth, guys, I've had the pleasure of working with Tim on several occasions. He was in Naples when we were kind of redoing our whole digital operation there, and I hired him at the Washington Examiner when he came back. I also worked with him briefly in Vegas. And the thing that I respected about him immediately was in Vegas, the digital guys and the print guys were kind of at war, right? The print guys did not trust the digital guys. The digital guys, I think, in some ways were a little dismissive toward the print guys. And Tim was one of the people in that organization who had the respect of both teams, right? He's a pure journalist, very good journalist, but he's also a digital journalist. Tim, one of the things I was hoping that you could maybe walk us through a little bit is, what does your day look like at the Washington Post? What do you do, and how are you guys getting the news online each day?
So the first thing, my day skews a little early, although I'm usually here late as well. It's kind of depends on what's going on in the news.
So your life hasn't changed.
Right? Yeah, basically. So I get in the morning. Our breaking news reporter comes in at 5 o'clock. Now I'm not here that early, but so it's kind of a combination of seeing what's going on out there. From a news standpoint, what do we need to jump on? And then I'm also compiling a report for my boss, who's the local editor, of what's out there, what are our numbers, what are our page views and uniques, what do they look like, what are the stories that we need to jump on, what could do well on social, and it's just kind of seeing not only what have we done, but what have we done, but also how can we complement that with other digital journalism, as well as what's the rest of the world doing, and is there something out there that we should be doing that we're not doing, and then assigning reporters to jump on those things as we need to. And then throughout the day, we're constantly, of course, updating our news that's going on. I run the local Facebook and Twitter accounts, as well as have a small team that jumps on both breaking news, but also just like quick, oftentimes quick hit zeitgeist type stories that might play well on the web, or hopefully do well on social media. And then working with reporters and editors to try to augment their stories as best as possible with some of the tools that we have available. So it's not just getting breaking news out there quickly. It's also how can we best tell the story using do we want to use a quiz? Do we want to use a tool, a poll? Do we want to use some of the other variety of tools that we have at our disposal here? And then it's making sure that reporters know that those are available, and we can tell their story in the best way possible, and then just getting stories ready for the following days, stories that will appear in the following day's paper, and making sure that they have social images and just those kinds of things. So the reporter has done his or her job, and then just making sure they're optimized for the digital world.
So what does the reporter need to do then? A lot of these students will come out of here and get jobs at TV stations, newspapers, other media entities. Where does the reporter's digital responsibilities end and yours pick up? Do they end?
So really, they don't. They don't end. I mean, this has actually been fairly new within the past several months, maybe a year, where reporters have gone through training to see their story from inception clear to the time where it's published, and then really even beyond, and looking at what is the reaction, what are some follow-up stories that you can do, is there social discussion that we can harness to create a second or even a third post. But from the start of a story, and this isn't every single story. I mean, if it's a precinct to a county commission story, those you're probably on your own there, and that's going to be okay unless it's a big story. But for stories that are a little meatier, that involve more people, certainly where there would be discussion from the beginning of how do we get various teams involved, graphics, video, photos, and all of that. But the reporter really is responsible for his or her story from the start to the end. I guess some of the key things for a standard story would be making sure that you have a headline that is appealing from a social standpoint. Making sure that the text that's going to show up when somebody shares your story on Facebook is something that will be appealing enough for them to want to, let the rest of their friends know that this exists, and then also selecting a share image for your story that is appealing. We've had entire training classes where those two things are, discussed for an hour and a half, and it's very important here. And our social, we get actually more views from social media now than we do, from our homepage. So our homepage certainly is not an afterthought, but at the same time, it's really not as important as social media, and that's just how people are finding our stories nowadays, and social and mobile are where everything is headed. The days that people come to their desktop computer or to our homepage.
How does social compare to search engine traffic for you? Has it outstripped Google, or are they like kind of neck and neck at this point?
Social is way bigger. So
really?
if I were to look at our numbers right now, and kind of going back to that, a few years ago, and even now to a certain extent, SEO was really big.
Right.
And now SEO, while it's not something that we ignore, but at the same time, social is way more important, and we put a lot more eggs into the social basket than we do SEO. If I were to look at our site right now, I could probably, my guess is probably I'd say 40-45% of our views are coming from social, and the search numbers are going to be in the single digits.
Wow, that
maybe
is a turnaround. Because it was what, 5 years ago that was inverted pretty much, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we used to try to fit. If we were writing a story, we try to fit proper nouns and full names and all of that into our headlines, and we just don't do that anymore. We do insert keywords into stories, but that's just something for Google to look for on the back end. It's not, it's just writing a headline that's going to appeal to a social audience is far and away the most important thing. And not only that, what we have our social team is growing by leaps and bounds as well. We have social embeds on each of our main desks to work with reporters as well on making sure we're writing the right kind of heads and selecting the right share image and all of that for all of our stories.
So what's that mean exactly? What a social embed, is that basically a social media guru who sits with the other journalists on the team?
It is, yeah. So like all of the major desks, local, national, foreign, style, sports, all have a social embed. This is actually just underway, so not every desk even has it.
Right.
This is probably in the next couple of months when we make those hires, those will be in place. But yeah, it's making sure that we are taking advantage of getting our work out there and through social channels the best way possible. So we'll have a couple of people being kind of experts on Twitter, others on Facebook, Snapchat, what can we do with Periscope that we're not doing now. So everyone kind of has a specialty or two, but then that we can kind of use their knowledge newsroom wide whenever we need to, but really their focus is on individual desks and making sure that national sports and local and all of them are taking advantage of social the best that we can.
And how do you guys decide what to experiment with? You mentioned Periscope there, which is, to me, is fascinating. I remember back in the day over at Treasure Coast newspapers when we were trying to do live broadcasts on the internet, it was painful. You know, now you can take an app on your phone, point it at somebody, and you're live. How do you guys decide what new budding technologies you're going to dabble in? Which ones? Is there a process to that, or is it just somebody says, hey, this would be cool, let's give it a shot?
I mean, I think it's a combination. It's a combination, but really, for the most part, we want to see some sort of critical mass. That, you know, there are so many things out there. There are things out there I've never even heard of, and there's no point in jumping on something where there's no audience. I mean, you know, we're here to build an audience, and really, there needs to be, you know, some sort of numbers of people who are members of that and who are using that technology. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense to waste our time on it. So I think we're actively looking at what is out there and what might be the next big thing. But as far as dedicating a bunch of resources to it, I mean, Facebook is by far and away our #1 player from a social standpoint. Twitter is a far second, and then after that, the numbers are, you know, drop dramatically.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw last week that your PR department at the Post announced biggest traffic numbers ever. It's freaking impressive, right? Because when I was in DC, Bezos had just bought the Post. I was really worried about, you know, what's going to happen now. And everything I'm reading in the past year or two suggests that you guys are adding staff, that it's kind of contrarian to what everybody thinks about newspaper. What is your traffic now, and how did that growth happen? I mean, traffic usually doesn't just happen overnight. And obviously, you guys are doing some things that are very strategic trying to make that happen.
Right, and there have been a few things. I mean, like you said, most newspapers are cutting staff, and at the same time, we have hired over 100 new people in the last, I don't know, it's 2 years or something, whatever the time frame is. So, you know, that's a large part of it. So we have, you know, just hiring new people. They've produced additional content, but of course, what those people have written has been very targeted to the audience that we think we can reach that we haven't reached before. We've built a couple of new staffs. So we have a general assignment team that now quickly jumps on breaking news that previously fell through. You know, we've always been great on national politics. We know how to do that. And there are lots of other topics that we know how to do. We have that legacy. But, you know, when there is, you know, some crazy shooting in, you know, name the state, that's not something we've typically had someone to jump on. We haven't had those sorts of people, and now we do. We have a whole team of them. So that, I would say, that is big. We have a team now that works in the middle of the night called Morning Mix, and they are, so as opposed to, you know, in a typical workday, you've got reporters coming in at 8, often 9 and 10 o'clock. That's way too late. Our traffic is peaking in the 8 o'clock hour. We need those stories to be up before then. So we have a team of reporters that work in the middle of the night to, you know, kind of make sure our news report is online is optimized even through 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's another big thing. I think our increase in, you know, sort of like social, what we talked about, and beefing up the social team, it has been big. And then, of course, just distribution has been huge for us. And some of that has been a result of Jeff Bezos buying it, and other things have not. But I mean, I think a couple of things that really stand out are the news network we have with, like, I think it's 300 and some papers now, where we are able to, where we provide a digital subscriber, our digital content free to people who subscribe to other newspapers across the country. And then you might have seen a few weeks ago, it was announced that Amazon Prime subscribers, you know, it's like 40 million people, are going to get the Post free for 6 months. So I mean, I think it's really a combination of lots of those things. And, you know, then there are other little things internally that we do, like, that I think, you know, builds up over time. None of them are game changers, just easy things like updating your timestamp on stories, so when you update it, so Google knows to rise, you know, that should be at the top of Google News when Google is really hungry for some, you know, some new news to display at the top in a breaking situation. You know, I think it's a combination, I think, of all of those things.
And how are you guys handling video?
So we actually just brought in a new person to lead our video staff a few months ago, and that's another team that has grown pretty significantly. You know, for each, it's kind of like the social team. we have a video embed in each of the main departments, actually a videographer and a video editor for each department. I think some of the types of video, I think we're sort of looking at it a little bit differently in that some of the video that we've done historically that didn't get the same, the audience that we would like, I think we're sort of pushing that by the wayside and not pursuing that anymore. Really, we're interested in, I think, three main buckets. There's like the quick hit story that is going to do, a story that we know is going to do really well. The video is maybe it's I don't know, some crazy crime on surveillance video that will take someone, literally a few minutes to get that into our player. Sure, of course we're going to do that. A longer term story that, some video, something that's, visually interesting, of course we'll always jump on that if we think it has the audience. And I think that's the key, is we have to feel like the audience is there, that it's going to get a certain number of views before we waste our time pursuing that. But then I think, we're still the Washington Post, and we want to continue to do that, that big J journalism. And I think you'll see all the time where a story that we might have spent months on doesn't perform nearly as well as maybe some story that we spent 30 minutes on that went viral. And we're still going to do those kinds of videos. Just because it took someone several months and maybe we went to, France there's a certain story that pops into mind, but, we're still going to continue to do those, even if we think the numbers aren't necessarily there, but that it's going to be amazing journalism. So, it's really just taking all of those factors into consideration and deciding how to move forward.
Are you guys using Google Analytics, or are you using another analytics package?
We use Chartbeat.
Okay, Chartbeat's cool. When you go into Chartbeat, what are the numbers, the analytical things that you go straight to? Like, it used to be, it was all page views, right? We were all focused completely on page views. What are you focusing these days when you jump into Chartbeat? Where are you going?
So, we use a chart. I would say it's a strong combination of Chartbeat and Omniture. So Chartbeat is giving us that information, that data for what is going on at this very moment.
Real time.
Omniture is more of a step. Yeah, right. And Omniture is more of a step back of looking, everything from how have we done earlier in the day to how did we do 3 years ago. So I would say some of the main, in Chartbeat, what I'm mainly looking at is the number of concurrents on our site, the number of people who are reading, reading our top story, not just our top stories, but reading our stories at any given moment. And also, really that is the key thing, but then also just the source of where are people coming from. I know that you can tell that if you're getting 80% of your traffic from the homepage and only 20% or less from social, once the homepage removes that story, that story's shelf life is kind of dead. Whereas if it's flipped, if you're getting 80% from social, you don't really care what the homepage is doing because people are finding your story regardless of the homepage. And so that will decide, or will influence if there are other things that we could do to that story to augment it. Is it a local audience? Is it a national audience? How are people finding it? Are there links that we can put into the story that are related to boost our recirculation rate, where people are coming to our stories and clicking on other things once they get there? Really, we want to try to keep them. So if we can increase the amount of time that people are spending engaged on our site, if they can come to our site and find other things that they want to click on to be, so we can kind of keep them and be as sticky as possible. That's a key. That's key. So really a lot of, I'm looking several times a day at what is doing well and then trying to make sure those stories are optimized because, there's no point in wasting time optimizing a story with 10 people on it, but if you have 5,000 on it, that's huge. And you want to try to keep them there.
It's funny because when I asked that question, you went straight to Chartbeat instead of Omniture. And again, 5 years ago, I would have gone straight to Omniture or Google Analytics, right? But now it's so in real time that I could tell just by where you're focusing now is what's happening on my site right now and how do I throw gasoline on it to make it happen more, right?
Exactly. And, we still get we have several automated reports that are from Omniture. Omniture is still a super critical part of what we're doing. And it, lets us know how are we doing now compared to a year ago. And, we get reports that show how are certain stories doing, how are blogs doing compared to a year ago, how is the audience breakdown of local, national, and international. So, that definitely lets us know that we're on the right track or that we missed the boat on something. But yeah, Chartbeat is certainly crucial for us.
Could you, I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to see what the students would like to ask you, but one of the assignments I had them was there was a piece in I think Neiman Labs on ARC, and I wouldn't mind hearing from your mouth. I mean, we were even debating a little bit before we started this call. What does ARC mean? What does it mean to you, right? And it sounds pretty revolutionary. It sounds kind of like the content guru over everything that I always wanted, right? Talk to us a little bit about that.
So it actually, you probably be surprised at how little it affects us now.
Interesting.
It's a lot of it is really behind the scenes at the moment. Now that's going to change, but at the for now, we're still using we use WordPress, and then really Method is our content management system that we use on the print side. But the vast majority of our stories that come out of, I wouldn't say the vast majority, I would say probably 2/3 of the story that come out of the newsroom are still into our print CMS. But the hope and the goal is that ARC will eventually change that when we sort of move away from our current print-focused CMS toward ARC. So every story that we put into Method goes in the back end in a portion of ARC, but it's not usually touched at this time. There are some other tools that are a part of the ARC system, like WebSched, for example, which is every story that we write appears in this tool called WebSched, and that's where we actually pitch our stories to our social team and homepage. So there are some components of it that we're using on a daily basis. And there have been a couple of high-profile stories that have been out there, the Syrian refugees, and something with Katrina I know was talked about a decent amount, but those are definitely the exceptions now. Our big template that we use for major stories still is in WordPress. It's not in ARC, but I think we all can see the direction where that's headed. ARC is still kind of in its infancy, but there are lots and lots of plans for it in the future.
So ultimately, do you think they're intending to replace WordPress with ARC, or that ARC will be kind of a lingua franca that talks to all of these different inputs, or do you even know yet? I mean, I think we don't exactly know. My guess is that we would still keep WordPress for our blogs, right.
And then ARC would be what we would use, for some of the more higher profile stories. But I think a goal is going to be making sure that we can use it not just for those huge, the stories that you publish a few times a year that are huge, where are going to get a very large audience. I think a key is going to be templatizing it to some extent, and so it is usable for a large variety of stories. I mean, you don't want to have the entire staff working on a story in ARC when it should be able to be used for a variety of stories, I guess is what I'm saying, as opposed to just using it kind of in a one-off instance. But
makes perfect sense. Tim, I sent you a list of questions that the students that they had top of mind. What I want to do is give them a chance now to talk directly to you. Who wants to ask Tim a question? Incredible chance. Here we go.
I was just wondering what you guys, you mentioned Periscope and kind of that live stuff, but what are you guys doing in terms of podcasting and stuff like that? Because that's kind of what I've developed a really big interest in, someone who likes audio and kind of radio type stuff, but understanding that radio is changing, and it seems like podcasts are kind of where radio is going. I was kind of just seeing what you thought of podcasts and what you guys use for podcasts.
We don't do a ton with them, and there are no podcasts that we do that kind of on the staff that kind of falls under my purview. There are individual blogs that do podcasts regularly, but it's not something that I deal with at all on any sort of normal basis. So I don't really have a good feel of. It would be hard for me to say post-wide sort of how we have handled podcasts, because really unlike video and social and graphics, and there's no set team that does it. It really is kind of down to how each individual blog wants to handle it. So I think it's kind of, I know that's not probably the answer you were hoping for, but I don't really have a good sense, because there is no sort of, system-wide philosophy on podcasts.
Do you see any impact on traffic from them? I mean, are they just kind of a blip in the scheme of things, or are they starting to, with the serial podcast, things like that, there's a lot of buzz around the idea. I was just wondering if you guys saw a little bit of lift. That may not be in your purview either.
Yeah, there's nothing that I have never seen a podcast appear on one of our our most viewed, stories or pages on the site. So it's not something that I think is registered as, being. Yeah. It's not something that is really huge for us by any means.
Another question?
Hi. So do programs like ARC, do you feel like they help journalists being like more tech savvy because they kind of like open up your world, or does it kind of like enable you to like not see what's going on because you can focus more on the journalism aspects?
So, I mean, I think it really makes, I think it allows you to be, it allows you to be, I think, more free. Like, I don't think you need to, I don't think a journalist necessarily has to be super tech savvy, but I think he or she needs to understand what is actually available and what are some of the things that are open to them. I think, with ARC, you've got the real big tech nerds in the background who are putting all of this together. So hopefully, us as reporters are able to use those tools to tell stories in the best way possible. So, I don't think that, I think it's a plus, I think, for journalists. I mean, it kind of gives them, I think, more ownership of their story, which is something we've been preaching now for several months, and I think that once those tools are rolled out, it will continue to give them even more ownership and let them be able to decide where certain elements of the story are displayed, where should we put multimedia, and right now some of those things aren't in their hands, and I think that they soon will be.
Cool, thank you.
Another question? Bethany?
Can you give an analogy of what ARC is? Because I'm having a little bit of difficult time because it's so new, but it's also a little ambiguous for me. Can you give like an analogy in terms of what we already know?
You still with us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it'll allow, there are certain, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay. So there are several components of ARC. I mean, it's really, it would eventually become our content management system, but really it's a platform that just contains several tools. So it's got the, there's the article page view. Our homepage is in ARC. That's probably one of the most high profile, the most high profile thing that you would see on any sort of daily basis. There will be a personalization engine as part of it, so it will actually know who you are and probably can tailor certain elements of the article page or homepage to your needs and where you are located. What kind of content have you read in the past? There's like an A/B testing component where we can tell if say we have two headlines on the page, it has more people clicking through than another headline, and then we can ultimately serve the most popular headline to readers. There are analytics tools that ultimately could replace Omniture or Chartbeat. A lot of it is getting rid of. It would get rid of lots of vendors that we have now who are providing various services to us, and kind of put all of those.
You okay? So as long that way we've got you. So
yeah.
I think there's still some confusion about ARC, but it sounds to me like what you're doing is what we were always afraid to do, right? Is to build the technology soup to nuts, because we weren't technologists, right? And it sounds like you're really building the rails that the trains are going to run on, no matter what kind of trains they are, where they're going, what they're carrying.
Right, and and really it's another. It was something that the Post was doing long before Jeff Bezos bought us, but then after, I think it's been in the works for like 3 years or so. But then after Bezos bought us, he was supportive of that initiative and really ramped things up, and the number of engineers on it has been huge. Yeah, it's and it will be another revenue source as well, and I'm sure that makes him happy. But yeah, it will be, and it'll be interesting to see, I think, who we're able to license this to, and how high profile will they be, and none of us know the answer to that at the moment. But
right. So, what other questions on our side?
I know you probably heard this before, same with a lot of people in this room, but what are you looking for in prospective interns or
good question.
Just not just journalists in general, but specifically web journalists, because I know some of us might try and go to paper or something, but I think some people are more focusing on digital. What kind of tools and knowledge do we need to have when we leave here to be at least starting off as pretty good web journalists?
I think it's having an understanding. So first of all, writing is always going to be important. And I would say that's probably going to be number one, and that has probably been number one for years, and I think it continues to be. But writing, not necessarily just long form, but also how to tell stories online. We have some reporters who are amazing at telling a 100-inch story on a Sunday A1. We have other reporters whose strengths are turning around a quick breaking news story, in like a minute, and being able to send out email alerts and all of that. And we have others who are great at just telling, other stories online. And I think there's a place for all of that. But in general, I would say for an intern or for a new hire, we're certainly looking for people who also understand that our future is in digital, or our future is in mobile, and that is how people are finding us, and who are familiar with various social networks, who use them, and can tell stories not only with words, but also realizes that if there are other ways to tell stories. Should we embed tweets? Should we embed Instagram photos? Finding stories in social media is big. Jumping on stories that might be at the if there's a local story that's at the top of our local subreddit, we're looking at that all the time. And it's just kind of, I think in the end, it's about building an audience and creating stories and content that people want to be a part of, and so I think it's writing, but it's also just having an open mind and understanding that being able to learn from other people, and I guess that's what I would say.
Are you guys hiring a lot of interns? Do you have an internship program, or?
We do, and the deadline was last Friday.
Oh.
So.
Do you know whom I could talk to there to get? I'd love to be more in the loop, because I've got some exceptional young journalists here that I'd love to be sending your way over the next year or three.
Yeah, I can get you that information.
Maybe you could email me that offline.
Yeah,
I'd love to have that.
Yep.
How about other questions, guys? Anything else you want to ask?
So since you moved around quite a bit, what made you move to the specific places that you moved? And a follow-up to that, do you think that as young journalists or people who are fresh out of college, that it's better if they move to a larger metropolitan area, or try to grind it out a little bit in like a smaller town?
So I've been in both. I've been. I guess my smallest market was Topeka, Kansas, which is 140, 150,000 people. So there certainly are markets that are smaller than that, but at the same time, I don't think that you should feel that that a young journalist should feel like they need to be in DC or New York and San Francisco at all. I think there's a lot of great journalism that's going on outside of major metropolitan areas, and if that is if there's a great opportunity that arises and somewhere that isn't quite as populated, I think by all means you should go for it. I think in a smaller place you can really get your hands dirty. You can do lots of things. For example, if here we have entire teams that do only graphics, and entire teams that do only social, and even within those teams there are people with even more specific specializations. And so while you're working with those people, oftentimes you're not really getting into the nitty-gritty of those topics. And I think at a smaller organization, you are able to gain that wider range of experience. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, and especially if you then want to eventually, a few years later, move on to a larger market, you have that background, you have that foundation, and I think that would be, certainly impressive for someone looking at resumes and trying to fill a job. So no, I don't think there should be some big push to try to move to a big city right off the bat, for sure.
And what drove some of your moves personally? And you and Kara have lived, like me and Laura, right? It's kind of funny because you're 15, 20 years younger than we, but your careers are kind of similar. What
Mhm.
drove you to go from one to the next? Was it where you just kind of hit a wall and said, okay, I've learned all I can here, or is it more a quality of life issue? Because I think these guys are looking at those types of decisions when they get out of here.
Mhm.
You take that first job in a place you might not be completely geeked about, knowing you're going to build a year or two experience, and then
Yeah, you know, my first job in Kansas. I'm actually from Kansas, and I went to Kansas State University. So you know, working in the state capital of the state that at that point I had lived in my entire life was appealing. But then, you know, after that, the sunny beaches of Florida became appealing, and that opportunity arose, and I wanted to jump at that. You know, I was there for a year and a half, and then after that, I moved to the Post. You know, I mean, I couldn't turn down an offer at the Washington Post, so I had to do that. Las Vegas isn't really my kind of town. I'm not much of a gambler. I'm much more DC than I am Las Vegas. But I moved out there with someone who you know, recruited me to go out there, and I went with him. It was fine. It was a good experience. We did lots of, I think, amazing things out there.
really did.
Yeah, but in the end, my wife and I, you know, we just decided that we were both. My wife also worked at the Las Vegas paper, so we both were employed at the same place. And we just decided, you know, we don't want to be here anymore. We were ready to kind of settle down more. We had moved across the country a few times and ready to kind of establish some root somewhere. And DC was what we both loved, and you know, ended up moving out here and buying a house. And I think we're probably here for the long haul now, but. You know, it was fun while it lasted, moving around, and I think ultimately, you know, each job was offered something unique, something different, and you know, you kind of have to learn what makes people tick in each new market, and I always found that very appealing. Yeah, each place kind of offers a new set of challenges, and ultimately you bring those challenges that those things that you learn from each place into the, you know, as you move up, and it just kind of travels with you. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Tell you what, Tony, I promise you we'd keep you to about 30 minutes, maybe a little over that. Anything that you want to add based on the questions you saw? Anything you think these guys need to know?
I mean, I think the main thing is just continue to stay updated on what is going on in digital media. I mean, it's digital media it's the future of the industry, and you know, by reading industry press, I always think is interesting because you do get a sense for what is and Twitter. I love Twitter. I'm on Twitter constantly, and I'm following. I think following lots of smart people on Twitter is also is very important. I mean, you can always get a sense for you know, not only what is going on at the moment, but just what are people thinking who are really smart in the industry. And I think that's huge. But no, I just say keep your skills sharp. Stay up to date with what's going on in the industry, and yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I think there have been lots of certainly been some bad news. There have been, you know, cuts and layoffs and buyouts, and in one sense it is scary, but I think in another, there are so many opportunities out there, and you know, we're all here to tell stories of you know, to the rest of the world, and we've never had so many tools at our disposal than we do now. So while in one sense it's scary, I think really the excitement certainly outweighs that, and I think it's a good time to be doing what we're doing.
Me too. Tim, thank you very much. Next time you and Kara are in Athens, dinner at costs on me and Laura.
All right.
But thank you so much for taking your time to talk to these students. I know that they appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great, of course.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day, man.
All right, you too. Bye.